He threw his black pregnant wife into the rain and shut the door. There was an argument that night. It heated up so fast, and then he threw her into the rain. Just like that. A pregnant woman, standing in the street, soaking wet. The door locked behind her. She pressed both hands against her stomach, not because of the cold, because it was the only thing she could hold on to. 8 months of marriage. A whole life she had moved across the world to build. Gone, in one night. In one argument she never saw coming. She had nowhere to go, but she had a number, one name, saved in her phone from before this marriage, before any of this. She stared at it in the rain. Then she called it. And what happened when that call was answered? You are not ready for it. Welcome to Afro-Korean Noir Stories. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. New stories drop every week and you don't want to miss a single one. And if you're already part of the family, welcome back. Let's get into this story. Because this one is going to stay with you. His phone rang again. Richard silenced it, without looking at the screen. He didn't need to look. He already knew the number. He already knew what was coming out of it. He was standing at the edge of the ocean. Busan. 8 in the evening. The sky had gone that specific orange that happens just before the dark rolls in. Warm and fading, almost beautiful. The waves came in slow and heavy against the wet sand. The smell of salt was thick in the air. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and stared at the sea like it owed him something. His mother's voice was still in his head even though he'd ended the call. Richard, you are 31 years old. Your cousin already has 3 children. Your father has spoken to the lawyers. If you don't come home with a wife before the end of this year, I promise you, the inheritance will not be yours. He'd ended the call, but the voice stayed. His parents didn't know who he was. They knew who they'd decided he was. And Richard had spent 12 years being very careful to keep those 2 things from ever touching. The right clothes, the right posture, the right smile, the one he'd practiced in mirrors since he was 19. The kind of smile that made whoever received it feel chosen. Because when you are the only son of a family whose name means something, and you are gay in a world that has not left you space to be, you learn to perform. You learn it the way people learn to breathe. Automatically, completely. Because the alternative is something you can't survive. Richard had been performing since he was a teenager. He was exceptional at it. But now his performance had a deadline. And Richard needed a solution. He was still running through the problem when he heard her laugh. It came from down the beach. Full, open, completely unguarded. The laugh of someone who was not watching herself at all. He turned. She was walking barefoot along the shoreline, shoes in one hand, phone in the other. Deep brown skin, catching the last of the evening light and holding it. She moved with the ease of someone who had earned this vacation and was not going to waste a second of it. Richard registered her the way he registered everything, not with feeling but with assessment. Foreigner, so no history in Korea to check against. Vacation so far from her network and her people. Beautiful enough that no one would question his choice. And alone on this beach at this hour, which told him she was either brave or independent. Probably both. He made a decision in less than 30 seconds. He walked toward her. You're going to cut your feet, he said. He nodded at the rocky stretch ahead of where she was walking. She looked up. Quick eyes. She read him in the space of 1 second. He felt it, the brief, efficient scan of a sharp person deciding whether to engage. I see the rocks, she said. I know a better path. He turned on the smile, the full one, the chosen one. I grew up coming to this beach. She studied him for one more beat, then she smiled back. I'm Rita, she said. He didn't know it then. He didn't understand what he had just set in motion. He thought he had found a solution. He had no idea that she had already saved someone far more dangerous than him, and that the man she saved had never forgotten it. But to understand that, you have to go back 3 days before Rita stepped foot on that beach. Back to a night on the coastal road above Hyundai that most people in Busan never heard about, because the people involved made sure of it. Jun Suk had not planned for the Daewoo faction to start shooting. He had planned for a negotiation. Territory on the southern corridor. A table, some coffee, and the kind of conversation that powerful men have when they want to settle something without making it visible. He'd brought 4 of his men. He'd come ready to talk. But 30 seconds before the first shot was fired, he knew. He felt it in his body before his mind confirmed it. The positioning was wrong. Daehwa's men were spread too far apart. Not conversational spacing, tactical spacing. Their hands were too still. The stillness of people already committed to a next move. He was already turning, already giving the signal to his men, when the warehouse exploded into gunfire. It was brutal and fast. No clean lines. No logic to it except survive. His men were trained. They responded hard and they held ground. but not before Junsuk took a round below his right ribs, and then a second one, grazing his left shoulder. He didn't stop. He made it to his car. He drove. This is what you do when your body is bleeding and your mind is still working. You move. You keep moving. You calculate while you can still calculate. The nearest safe house was 22 minutes north. He drove, but blood doesn't negotiate. The coastal road was empty at that hour. Dark water on his right, city lights far to his left. His hands were growing heavy on the wheel. His vision was doing something strange at the edges, softening, narrowing, the way it does when the brain isn't getting what it needs. He fought it. He pushed through it. He lost. The car drifted across the empty road, crossed the lane, hit the concrete barrier at the shoulder with a sound like a thunderclap in the silence. Steam rising from the hood, the headlights pointing sideways at nothing. Junsuk slumped over the wheel, bleeding, unconscious, alone on an empty road in the dark. And then, running feet on wet pavement. Rita had been sitting on the seawall. She'd been in Korea for 2 days, still finding her footing, still adjusting to the sounds and the smells and the particular texture of this city she didn't know yet. She liked sitting near water when she was somewhere new. It helped her feel less displaced. She saw the car drift before she heard the crash. The slow, boneless way it crossed the lane, headlights swinging wrong. The barrier impact was loud enough to reach her even from that distance. She was already running before the echo finished. She reached the car, pulled the door open. The man inside was large, broad-shouldered, head against the wheel, dark shirt, but dark and wet in a way that had nothing to do with the night air. Blood, a lot of it. She pressed her scarf against the wound with both hands, all her weight behind it. She pinned her phone against her ear with her shoulder, called emergency services without letting go of the pressure, and talked to him. "Stay with me," she said. "I've got you. You're going to be fine." She talked to him the way she talked to every patient she'd ever fought for. Like the talking itself was part of the treatment. Here is what she did not know in that moment. This man led the most powerful criminal organization on the southern coast. He'd just survived a planned assassination. He'd taken 2 bullets and driven 20 minutes on instinct alone. Rita didn't know any of that. She held the wound and she talked and she did not let go. By the time the ambulance lights appeared, at the far end of the road, the bleeding had slowed. Barely, but enough. She had bought him the time he needed. 5 days later, he was sitting up in the recovery room, already arguing with the nurses, already insisting he was well enough to leave. One of his men brought her in. His name was Junsuk. He looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. The look of someone who takes looking seriously. "You stopped," he said. "I'm a nurse. You're a tourist. Alone, at midnight, you could have called for help and walked away." "I couldn't," she said. "Not and still be myself." Something moved across his face, small, quick. A door opening 1 inch and almost closing again. "How bad was it?" he said. "Bad. You're lucky you hit that barrier when you did. 5 more minutes of driving, and we wouldn't be having this conversation." He absorbed that. "Your name is Rita," he said. "Yes. You leave in how long?" 10 days. He reached for the notepad on the table beside the bed. He wrote a number and held it out to her. "Call me if you need anything while you're here," he said. Then, after a pause, "or after." She took the number. She told herself it was professional. She filed it in her phone and didn't examine why she was keeping it. She went back to her vacation. Met Richard on the beach 3 days later. Said yes to a proposal 3 weeks after that and moved her life to a country that wasn't hers. She kept the number. She should have paid closer attention to why. The wedding was small and clean. A civil ceremony on a Tuesday morning. Dinner at a restaurant with paper lanterns and dark wooden tables. And a menu that had been chosen for the photographs. Rita wore cream. Richard wore gray and smiled exactly the way happiness is supposed to look when someone is watching. She moved into the apartment. And in the beginning, let's be honest. In the beginning, it was close to what she'd believed it would be. He took her through the city, like it was a gift he was giving her. New restaurants. Markets with no English on any of the signs. Streets that only locals knew. He called her beautiful. He held her hand in public. He asked about her family back home with what looked like genuine interest. But here is what no one at that wedding knew. Richard had been in love for 8 years. Not with Rita. With a man named Daewon. Daewon had been his closest friend since university. He'd known the truth about Richard before Richard ever said it out loud. He'd waited, patiently, privately, for years, while Richard performed the version of himself that his family needed. Daewon had accepted everything, the secrecy, the public distance. The years of being introduced as just a friend, my oldest friend, we went to school together. And when Richard brought home a wife, Daewon accepted that too. He came to the apartment. He played the role, The old university friend, harmless, part of the furniture. He smiled at Rita, made conversation, kept everything locked down and contained. Almost, because Rita was sharp. She noticed things. She noticed the way Daewon's whole posture shifted the second he walked through the door. The ease that came into him, like putting down something heavy. She noticed the way conversation stopped just before she entered a room. Not paused. Stopped. The specific silence of people who were saying something they didn't want heard. She noticed the way Daewon's eyes always found Richard first. Always. With something in them she couldn't name but couldn't stop registering. She noticed and she gave it other names. Old friendship. Protectiveness. Nothing. She kept giving it other names for 4 months. Then she got pregnant. Tuesday morning. Positive test. She sat in the bathroom for an hour. Cold tile under her. The test in her hands. Feeling the full size of what had just changed. She walked out and told him. She watched his face in the half-second before he managed it. There it was. Just a flash. Something crossing his eyes so fast it was almost not there at all. She saw it, she didn't know what it meant, but she saw it and she stored it. Then the performance came up, the smile. The arms around her. All the right words in the right order. She let herself be held. She tried to believe it, but that flash sat inside her like a stone she couldn't put down. And then Richard started disappearing. Not suddenly, quietly. The way people retreat when they're hoping you won't notice the distance until it's too wide to cross. He worked longer hours. He came home later. The conversations got shorter. The space between them in bed at night got wider even when nothing moved. Daewon came more, not less. He was at the apartment some evenings before she got home from her shift, and that stopping that wasn't pausing would happen when she walked in. And she'd greet them both and make herself tea and go to the bedroom, because something about being in those rooms when Daewon was there pressed against her skin in a way she couldn't explain. She lay awake at 2 in the morning doing the math on things she didn't want to add up. Everything in her was telling her to ask the question directly. She kept finding other explanations instead. That was the last mistake she would ever make for him. She was not supposed to be home that Thursday. Her shift ended early. A colleague covered her last 2 patients. She called Richard on the bus home. No answer. Called again. Silence. She used her key, stepped inside. The hallway was dim, but the apartment wasn't empty. She could hear them from the front door. Voices from the living room, low and easy, the voices of 2 people, completely certain they were alone. She set her bag down on the hallway floor without deciding to do it quietly. The instinct just moved her. She walked toward the sound. She turned the corner into the living room, and she saw. There was nothing ambiguous about it. Nothing to reinterpret or explain away. Richard and Daewon were together on the couch, and the way they were together was the complete absence of pretense. 2 people who had dropped every layer of performance the moment the front door closed. 8 months of marriage. All of it explained in 1 second. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever stood inside. Daewon saw her first. He stood up immediately. His face did several things at once. Guilt, yes. But underneath the guilt, something she would recognize much later. Relief. The specific relief of someone who is exhausted by a secret and has just had it lifted from them, even like this. Richard stood more slowly. His face went cold, not ashamed, not sorry, cold, like the real face surfacing after months behind a mask. Rita, he said. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach. Pure instinct. Protect the one thing that hasn't lied to you. How long? Her voice was flat, steady, her nurse voice. How long have you been with him? Richard said nothing. 8 years, Daewon said, quietly, from across the room. 8 years. Before the beach, before the proposal, before Korea and the apartment and every single moment she had mistaken for real. Before all of it, Daewon. You were already with him, she said, when you walked up to me. Silence from Richard. Your parents. The inheritance. He still didn't speak. His silence was the loudest confirmation she had ever received. I was the solution, she said. That's all this ever was. Something crossed his face. Not guilt. The discomfort of being seen accurately by someone you plan to manage. You had a good life here, he said. She stared at him. You have the apartment. You have, I am 7 months pregnant. The words came out quiet, quieter than shouting, harder. I am carrying your child, and you used me. You looked at me on a beach, and you decided I was what you needed. You never once, not once, thought about what that made me. The argument came then, fast and loud. Words that had been pressurized for 8 months forced up through the crack all at once. She said things she hadn't known she was holding. He said things that proved, finally, who had always been underneath the smile. She went to the bedroom, packed what mattered. Passport, money, phone, a photograph of her mother. The small folded things she had already started collecting for the baby. Soft colors. soft fabric, waiting in a corner. She came back down the hallway. He was at the door. He opened it. The rain hit her immediately, cold, instant, completely indifferent to what had just happened inside. She stopped on the top step. She turned back. He was in the doorway, backlit by the warm apartment light. Day one somewhere behind him in the background, not speaking, not moving. She looked at Richard. The way you look at something you want to remember clearly enough that you never make this mistake again. He held her gaze. I didn't even love you, he said, and he shut the door. She stood in the rain, both hands pressed flat against her stomach, the street empty in both directions, the rain coming down straight and cold, and without drama. Just weight, just contact, landing on her over and over. She gave herself 60 seconds. She had learned this in emergency rooms. You don't make decisions in the first 60 seconds of a crisis. You breathe. You let the shock move through you, then you act. She breathed. The baby kicked. I know, she whispered. I hear you. We're getting out of the rain. She opened her phone. She found the number. The one she had been telling herself for 8 months she was keeping for professional reasons. The one she'd opened late at night, lying in the dark next to a man who felt like a stranger, and closed again without calling. She called it now. 3 rings. Rita. His voice. Present. Like the name had been ready. Junsuk. She pressed her free hand against her stomach. I need help. A pause. Brief. Are you hurt? No, the baby's okay. He threw me out. I'm standing in the street. Quiet on the line. Not empty quiet. He was there. She could feel him there. Street name, he said. She told him. 9 minutes, he said. I'm staying on the line. He stayed on the line. No words to fill the silence, no questions, no comfort performed for its own sake. Just there. A steady presence on the other end while the rain came down on her. The car arrived in 7. The gates of the estate opened before the car stopped. The property was in the hills above the city. Dark grounds, quiet landscaping. The kind of place that tells you nothing about itself from the outside, which is exactly the point. Warm yellow light in the windows. The sound of the car engine fading into silence as it stopped on the gravel drive. One of Junsuk's men walked her from the car to the front door. He held the umbrella over her head, not his own. She noticed that. The door opened before she could knock. Junsuk was standing in the doorway. She hadn't seen him in over a year. He had recovered fully. Stood straight, broad-shouldered, filling the doorframe with a quietness that came from a man being exactly where he had decided to be. Dark sweater, hair slightly loose. The look of someone who had been home for the evening and came to the door the moment the car pulled through the gate. He looked at her. All of her, soaking wet dress. 7 months of baby pressing against the soaked fabric. Face composed in the way of someone who has used up their tears and is now simply standing. He didn't perform concern. He didn't do the uncomfortable social math of someone who doesn't know what to say. He looked at her the same way he had looked at her in that hospital room, like looking at someone was something he took seriously. Come inside, he said. 2 words. She came inside. The hallway was warm. Dark wood floors polished and quiet under her wet shoes. Low amber light from a lamp on a side table. He called the household's medical staff, a woman who came quickly and checked Rita without fuss. The baby was fine. Blood pressure elevated from stress but manageable. Rest, warmth, water. Dry clothes appeared, simple, enormous on her, his clearly. She folded the sleeves back 4 times. Junsuk waited outside the door the entire time. Not pacing, not managing something else. There. The specific stillness of a man who has decided where he should be. When she came out, he guided her to a warm room. Low couch, amber lamp in the corner. He sat across from her and looked at her. He didn't ask, she told him anyway. All of it, the beach, Richard. The marriage, the months of distance and day one's eyes and 1,000 small things she had explained away. Coming home early, what she found. The argument. The door, the rain. She said all of it in a voice that was almost completely steady. She held herself together the way she had always held herself together. The way she had trained herself to do in far worse rooms than this one. When she finished, the room was quiet. You'll stay here tonight, he said. I don't want to. You knocked on my door, he said. Level. Not soft, not hard. Sure, in the rain, pregnant, you came here. That means something. So you'll stay. She looked at him for a long moment. Thank you, she said. She filed for divorce 11 days later. Her lawyer was excellent. She would find out much later that this was not an accident, but she chose not to ask too many questions about it. The petition was precise, fraud, intentional deception. A woman brought into a marriage under false pretenses for the sole purpose of producing an heir. Every word documented and earned. Richard's lawyer called within 48 hours. He wanted to settle, fast, quiet, below anything visible. She understood immediately why. A full fraud case, argued openly, would expose everything. The inheritance scheme, his parents, day one. The entire architecture he had built his life around would come apart in public. He was terrified. She told her lawyer to accept nothing for 2 weeks. She let him sit in it. She sat in it too. Her own apartment now, small and clean. Her name on the door and her things on the shelves. She felt all of it. The grief of the marriage she'd believed in, the anger that came after it. The particular humiliation of being seen as a tool rather than a person. She let it all move through her. She didn't rush any of it. And on the other side, she found what she always found after the hard things herself. Intact. She told her lawyer to accept settlement terms significantly better than Richard's first offer. The apartment. Money enough to cover her and her child for years. A sealed acknowledgement of the fraud in the official documents. Not public, not weaponized, just recorded, just real. Richard signed. Here is what Jun-suk did without being asked. Without telling her. Without putting his name on any of it. Without explaining his reasoning or offering her the choice to stop him. He simply acted. The way he acted on everything, with patience, precision, and no mercy at all. Richard's import business ran on 12 major supplier relationships built over 6 years. Over 3 months, 11 of them quietly moved to competitors. The offers those competitors made were too good to refuse on paper. Richard made calls. He found doors that had been open for years now closed with a politeness that left him nothing to argue against. He hired investigators. The investigators found nothing. Then his properties. 3 commercial buildings across the city. Stable income. The kind of asset that insulates a man from most kinds of bad luck. The buildings started having problems. Code violations discovered by inspectors who arrived unannounced. Tenants who received better offers on comparable spaces and chose to move. His best anchor tenant, a ground floor restaurant that had been there since before Richard bought the building, broke its lease over a fire suppression issue. The inspectors said should have been addressed long ago. Richard tried to fight it. He had nothing to fight with. Then the contract. His father's company had held a government logistics contract for 11 years, foundational. A competitor filed for renewal at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right documentation, backed by exactly the right relationships. The contract went to the competitor. Richard's father called furious. The board held emergency meetings. Richard's position, the position he had spent his entire life being prepared for, became suddenly, completely uncertain. And then Dae-won, because secrets under pressure always find their way to the surface, told someone. And the word moved the way it always moves in closed circles. Quietly. Completely. Until it reached the people it had always been going to reach eventually. Richard's parents found out. The conversation that followed was the one Richard had spent 31 years engineering his entire life to prevent. The inheritance was redirected to his cousin. Dae-won left the city. 8 months after shutting his door on a pregnant woman in the rain, Richard had lost the business, the buildings, thus the contract, the inheritance, and every single thing he had traded her life to protect. Justice doesn't always arrive loud. Sometimes it is quiet and precise and leaves nothing standing. Rita gave birth on a Tuesday morning in April. The sky over Busan was clear, pale blue, the kind of morning that feels like it was made deliberately. 12 hours of labor. She went through it with the particular stubbornness of a woman who has already survived things designed to break her. She breathed and pushed and held on. Her doctor was steady. The nurses were kind. At 7:42 in the morning, Nadia arrived, small. Furious, perfect. The nurses placed her on Rita's chest, and she looked down at her daughter and felt something she didn't have a name for. Not just love. She'd expected love. This was larger. The specific feeling of understanding what you were built for. Not in a small or limiting sense. In the largest sense available to a person. Hi, she whispered. Nadia opened her eyes, dark and unfocused, finding the light. Hi, Rita said again softer. We made it, baby. We made it. One of the nurses mentioned, with a carefully neutral expression, that there was a man in the waiting room who had been there since the previous evening. Rita didn't need to ask who. When she was ready, she asked for him to come in. Jun-suk stood in the doorway of the hospital room. No flowers, no performance of what the moment was supposed to look like. Just himself, standing in the doorway, looking at her and at the small person on her chest with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Open. The composure was still there, but something inside it had shifted. You were in the waiting room all night, she said. Yes, I didn't ask you to come. No, he said. Why? He came into the room. He sat in the chair beside her bed. He looked at his hands for a moment. Those hands that she had once pressed a scarf against on a dark coastal road to keep a stranger alive. Then he looked back at her. The night on the road, he said. I was running the numbers in my head, the way I always do. How much blood? How much time? What are the chances? he paused. And I got to the place in the numbers where the chances weren't good. And the last thing I remember thinking, before everything went dark, wasn't about the syndicate. Wasn't about anything I'd built or anyone who worked for me. He stopped. I thought, I don't know if there's anyone who'll miss me for a reason that's real. Rita was very still. And then you were there, he said, pressing your hands on my wounds, talking to me. Stay with me. I've got you. You're going to be fine. He looked at her. You didn't know me. You had no reason. You just stayed. A pause. You showed me that someone would. The room held the quiet between them. Nadia made a small sound, investigating the silence. He told me he never loved me, Rita said. Not with grief. Just as a fact being reported. That night, before he shut the door, he said it like he wanted me to carry it forever. Are you carrying it? Jun-suk asked. She thought about it honestly. Less than I was, she said. Every day a little less. He nodded. And you? She said. Waiting rooms. Cars in the rain. Paying attention all this time. Her eyes were steady on him. You've been carrying something too. He was quiet for a moment. Something real, he said, simply. Like that was the whole answer. Like he'd been waiting to say exactly those two words to the right person. She looked at him for a long moment. I don't know what this is yet, she said, between us. I don't have a name for it. Neither do I, he said. I'm not ready to name it. That's fine, he said. I'm just here. She looked down at Nadia, then back at him. I'm staying, she said. Not a declaration. Not a promise of something they hadn't built yet. Just the simple, accurate fact of where she was and who she was saying it to. Jun-suk looked at her. I know, he said. Weeks became months. Jun-suk came to the apartment often. He learned without being asked to sit on the floor when he was there. Nadia had made it clear early that she preferred people at her level. He adapted without comment or complaint. Rita had watched it happen the first time. The most powerful man on the southern coast lowering himself to her living room floor because a 5-month-old had preferences. And she had not said a single word about it. She hadn't needed to. The thing between her and Jun-suk had no name yet. She hadn't given it one. She was still rebuilding. Her work, her sense of herself, her life in a country that had tried to swallow her whole. She was doing it carefully, the way she did everything. But she was not doing it alone, and that was new. And she was learning to let new things be new without being afraid of them. Then came the morning Nadia pulled herself up. She had been sitting between them on the floor. A yellow rattle near her left hand, a cloth book folded open near her right, a patch of morning sunlight coming through the window and landing warm on the carpet beside her. Rita was on the couch. Jun-suk was on the floor, where he always was now. Sleeves rolled up, his composure quietly undermined by the expression he wore whenever Nadia looked directly at him. Nadia grabbed the edge of the low table with both hands. She pulled and stood, swaying, eyes enormous. The expression of someone who has just realized the world is larger than it looked from the floor, and is very pleased about this. She looked at Jun-suk. She let go of the table. 3 steps, lurching and completely committed. She crossed the space between them and grabbed his shirt with both fists to stop herself from going down. He caught her, both hands, immediate and steady. Like catching her was something he had already decided he would always do. She looked up at him with the total certainty of someone who already knew he would be there. And Jun-suk, who ran the Myeongdong Syndicate, who had rebuilt the southern corridor from nothing, who had never once lost his composure in a situation that required him to keep it, looked down at this small person holding his shirt with both fists. And he smiled, not the deployed kind, not the performed kind, the real one. Rita saw it from the couch. She saw the whole thing, her daughter, this man, the particular shape of this moment, and everything that had to break and fall apart and hurt so that this exact morning could exist. Richard had looked at her on a beach and seen a solution. Jun-suk's had sat on her living room floor because a baby preferred it. That was the whole difference. That had always been the difference. Nadia laughed, full and open and completely unguarded, exactly like her mother's laugh. The same laugh that had caught Richard's attention on a beach and led to all of this. The same laugh that had caught Jun's attention in a hospital room and changed the way he understood what was worth protecting. Rita pressed her hand flat against her chest and felt something settle there, quiet and certain, the feeling of something finding its place. The rain had not cared that night on the street, but she had cared. She had always cared. About strangers on dark roads, about the lives under her hands, about the truth of things even when the truth cost her. And her caring had brought her here, to this floor, to this man, to this small person who was going to grow up knowing what it looks like when someone stays. She had come to Korea on a vacation. She had found instead the whole shape of her life. Nadia laughed again, and this time Jun-suk laughed back. Want to know what happened after? Part 2 is available on Gumroad. Link in the description. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find stories like this one. Subscribe if you haven't already and turn on your notifications. New stories drop every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. We'll see you in the next one.